it's Jonathan. Welcome to Talkin Bible with Juan and John. You might notice that Juan's not here with me right now. He's on a trip, so that made this video a little more challenging. We got it done though, but we had to be creative, so it's going to look a little different. You'll find out soon. Before I get to that though, let me recap. Basically, we are taking a question that Juan gave us on Sunday, and we're going to discuss it and break it down for you. In this case, I picked the question, and I'm going to ask Juan and see what he has to say. I hope you enjoy.
Get started. So, the question that I have is, do you think that Jesus expects us to be perfect?
Okay. That's a good question.
You thought of it.
That is true. I did think of that. I would say no is the answer to that he doesn't expect us to. I would say that he wants us to, to try to be holy. And I think when we have a relationship with Jesus, when we seek him and when we follow him, that he helps us. He transforms our heart, right? And we call this sanctification process, right, where he helps us on this journey of becoming holy, like he is holy. But I think that is with the knowledge that we can't achieve that in this life, right? And so that's why he says at the beginning of Matthew that he came to uphold the law, right? Then to fulfill all the requirements of righteousness, so that he could then be that substitute for us in our imperfection, right? When he takes our place, when the Father sees us, he sees the perfection of Jesus and his righteousness that we couldn't fulfill on our own in our time here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that, and that's my thoughts as well. I've heard it compared to say archery. If you're shooting, at a target, maybe you're not gonna hit the bullseye every time. Obviously, you're gonna mess up sometimes. But if you don't aim for the bullseye, you're gonna do a lot worse.
Yeah.
So, kind of the same idea that as Christians, we know we're not going to be perfect. And Jesus knows that. And I don't think, like you said, that he expects us to be perfect. But I think that he expects us to do our best to follow him, knowing that we will fall short, but also knowing that with his help, we can continue to become more like him. So, just like you said.
Yeah. And I think, I really, I think the reason I asked this is because, or I thought of this question, is because I think that there's a misconception, particularly, depending on what your faith background is or something like that, or what you've heard, or perhaps what someone has even preached, incorrectly. There's this belief, that we do have to be perfect, and that and so it creates, these expectations that are often that lead, to a life that's apart from the joy and the peace, and the grace that we have in Jesus, because perhaps we're always filled with guilt or shame, or just this feeling of or even just, that God has these demands on us that we'll never be able to quite fulfill, right? And that's not the life that God intends for us, so but instead, I think there ought to be, if our love for the Lord is genuine, then there's this sense, and this understanding of how much he's loved me, what my identity is, again, as being adopted into the Father's family, that it's from that place that, there's at least a desire in my heart to be like Jesus, right? And based on all his teachings, where he says, follow me, and give up your life, and based on everything that he teaches, and in my learning him as I follow him, that should awaken in me a desire to, fulfill certain requirements, to at least attempt to, knowing that I won't, but that he again fills in the gaps.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was thinking too, it's like that's kind of, I mean, that's if you really think that you have to be perfect, that Jesus expects us to be perfect. I mean, that makes it challenging because in some ways that's what he saved us from, because
Mm,
originally you did have to be perfect. We were under the law, and if we wanted to get to heaven, we did need to obey it perfectly. But Jesus knew that we couldn't do that. That's why God sent him to take our place, so that in our imperfection he could still show us grace. And I
mm,
think the other thing that I was going to add is just that if you're too focused on being perfect, I think sometimes it can distract you from, I guess it can kind of shift your perspective in a negative way in some ways, because if you're trying to be perfect and you never want to mess up, I find that's often when you kind of are afraid to try things. Maybe you're afraid to step out in faith because what if you make a mistake? What if so it's easy then to not take chances and maybe not follow God where he would lead you, because you're too focused on just trying to
mhm.
be perfect. And I think that it in some ways can get in the way of our faith, because that's the whole point, that we're not always going to know exactly what to do. We're going to mess up sometimes. We have to trust that God has a plan, and that he'll
Hmm.
use even our mistakes and our sin for our good ultimately.
Yeah, yeah. It reminds me of this Tim Keller that I quote that I posted last week. That I'll just summarize it, but it basically said, like, you're so messed up, you're so broken, um, and such a sinner, right? That Jesus had to die for you, but then you're so loved, that he was glad to die for you. And so it's just a reminder. And God is so good and loves us so much that he uses our imperfection, and he uses the times that we stumble and the times that we mess up, to actually help us grow and to teach us more and to bring us closer to him. And also remember that when Jesus forgives us for our sins, he forgives us for all of our sins, even the sins that we haven't even committed yet, even the sins that I'm going to commit when an old man, and I'm forgiven once. We are forgiven once and for all. And I think a lot of people just have the assumption, right, before they come to know Jesus, that they need to get their ducks in a row, right, that they need to fix their lives, and then they'll be good enough to come to Jesus and to
Right.
follow him, when it's actually the complete opposite. We hopefully we encounter his love, whether it's in a person, or it's in the scriptures, or just in a moment of solitude and calling out to God. We encounter his love and we're welcomed into that. And then, because we're messed up, and because we have scars and wounds and things from the past, and just all these things in our personality, God, Jesus then walks with us and brings us into this process of sanctification, of wholeness, of healing and restoration from all of that, which hopefully little by little just helps us to build a life that then just reflects him. That when people look at our lives, they can see not that we're perfect or that we're even good, but that we're following Jesus and we're trying to live a life that imitates the life that Jesus lived.
Yeah, and that was pretty much the next point that I was going to make, because that, yeah, that even as we are imperfect, that we can still follow Christ, right? That he he expects us to put him first, as it says, to take up our cross and follow him, and to, yeah, try and honor him in every area of our lives. But at the same time, he knows we're going to make mistakes, and that's why he died for us, that he knows we can't do it perfectly. And so that yeah, there are expectations and it can be challenging, but at the same time there's grace and forgiveness as well.
Yeah. Yeah, dude,
So yeah.
that's good. In closing, I just wanted to let our viewers know that the reason we're using this format is because I'm in Colorado and you're in
Yeah.
Waynesburg. You didn't
Yeah,
mention
well,
that at the beginning, so
No, I was gonna mention that at the end. Obviously it's a little different,
Oh yeah.
but hey, we had to make do. What can you do? So,
Yeah, no, it worked out. I'm glad that you asked that question. I think that's very important to talk about. So,
yeah, it was good. So anyway,
all right,
yeah, as you said.
you gonna sign off?
So, yeah, signing off. That's my
Signing
signature.
off, man.
All
I'm
right.
Juan, and that's John, and we're talking Bible once again.
Yep. See ya.
Till next time, man.